Good morning, Fairfield Christian School and Natomas Christian School. Hope you guys had a fantastic weekend. Can you believe we only have 2 weeks until Christmas break? That's right, just 2 weeks left in the semester. So let's make sure we're getting our work done. Let's make sure we're finishing strong. This is not the time to procrastinate. We're going to finish the semester in the best possible way. In fact, this week is the last memorization that you guys are going to do for the semester. Last scripture memorization. That's it. This is the last one. So again, let's finish strong. Let's make sure we get a good grade on this verse this week. Make sure you memorize it because it's an important verse, as all of these scripture verses are. All right? So we're in the book of John this week, John chapter 16. Now, we're in the Christmas season. And you may be wondering, how come we're not in like John chapter 1 or maybe in Matthew or maybe in Luke looking at the birth of Jesus? Well, I specifically chose this verse in John chapter 16. This is during the Last Supper, so right before Jesus' death. But I chose this verse because it's important to understand that we can't separate all the accomplishments of Jesus. We can't separate all the things he did. We can't even separate it from the prophecies about Jesus. They're all connected and they're all important. And what makes one thing important is how it's connected to the other things. In fact, the birth of Jesus, that what we celebrate for Christmas, really is not that important if he does not die and rise again. It's not important if he doesn't accomplish those things. If Jesus does not accomplish salvation, if he does not shed his blood for you and me, and then conquer death through his resurrection, then his birth really doesn't mean very much. His birth is at that point is no different than anybody else's birth. But what makes his birth so special is what he accomplished in his life and in his death and in his resurrection. So that's why this week we're looking at some of these verses from the end of his life. And our Christian characteristic this week is peaceful. And if we take a look back on the Old Testament, the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, Isaiah had some titles for the Messiah, this future Messiah who would be Jesus when he's born. And those titles were Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. And that's what Jesus would be. He'd be the Prince of Peace. And we get to see that in these verses today. All right, so we're in John chapter 16, verses 31 through 33. Elementary, you're just memorizing verse 33. This is what it says. Jesus asked, "Do you finally believe? But the time is coming, indeed is here now, when you will be scattered, each one going his own way, leaving me alone. Yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world." Man, there's a lot in this verse. I could probably preach for like 2 hours on just these 3 verses. There's a lot here. I won't go that long. I know we only have a few minutes. But right in the beginning, Jesus asked, "Do you finally believe?" He's talking to his disciples. His disciples have been with him for like 3.5 years. And yet they've struggled with believing some of the things that Jesus is saying, including Jesus saying he's the Son of God. And that's partially because Jesus, some of the way he spoke was kind of confusing sometimes. And the disciples weren't really sure, and they're kind of confused. And so that's what he and the disciples are kind of talking about right before these statements take place. But they are finally starting to get it. They're finally starting to realize who Jesus is and what his mission is to be. And Jesus is like, "Really? You finally believe? Great, because now you guys are about to be scared and you're going to be scattered. You're going to flee." And that's because when Jesus is arrested, the disciples think that they might be arrested next. So they kind of all go into hiding. And Jesus is prophesying about this. You guys are all going to be scattered. They're going to leave Jesus alone. And Jesus was alone after he was arrested, when he was beaten, when he was whipped, when he was nailed to the cross. He was alone. In fact, only one disciple showed up to the crucifixion, and that was his good buddy John. But during that whole process of going from trial to trial, and through all the various torture that he went through, Jesus was alone. Except he wasn't alone, because he always had the Father with him. So even during these scary, scary times, Jesus was never alone. He always had the Father with him. God was always with him. And as we get into this Christmas season, it's important that all of you understand that. You are never alone. God is always with you. During the Christmas season, many people can feel depressed. They can feel sad. Many times because they see everybody else around them having lots of joy, spending time with family, getting gifts and buying gifts and all that kind of stuff going on. And maybe their life just is not like that. Maybe they have some issues in their family. Maybe financially, their family is not doing real well. Maybe just things are just bad in their life overall. People tend to sometimes get dark and depressed. Maybe they feel really alone. I know some of you probably know what I'm talking about. But you know what? You're never truly alone because God is always with you. All you have to do is ask Him. And that's what Jesus is talking about here. Jesus, even though He was going through a very dark, scary time, and He could have had despair and worry and stress, He was never alone. We're about to have finals. Some of you high school kids may be having a lot of worry and stress over finals. You don't have to feel that way because Jesus is there for you. He says right there, you can have peace in me. And that's what Jesus is there for. Jesus is telling everybody all this. He says it right there in the verse. I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. You don't have to worry and stress. You can have peace in your heart no matter what you're going through. And there's going to be things that you go through. You're going to have trials and sorrows because this world is full of it because of sin. Bad things happen. But you don't have to worry about it. You can have peace in your heart because Jesus is going to be there for you. And we can take heart. We can have peace in our heart because Jesus has already overcome the world. And when we talk about the world, what we're talking about is anything out there that's not a part of God, that's not, part of God's word or part of God Himself. The world, that could be people, that could be governments, that could be ideas and philosophies and laws. There are lots of things that are part of the world. But Jesus has overcome the world. And those things don't have to be trials and sorrows and obstacles for us. Because Jesus can help us overcome those. Let me give you a little example here. Let's say somebody told you, you have to climb Mount Everest. Mount Everest is the biggest mountain in the world. And let's say somebody told you had to climb that mountain. Now, there are people that have died trying to climb Mount Everest. It's really high, the area is really thin, it's really cold up there. Weather conditions change very rapidly. And so, if somebody told you you have to climb Mount Everest, who would you want to take with you? Would you rather take somebody with you who's never climbed Mount Everest before? Or would you rather take somebody with you who's done it before, who has experience, that can kind of show you the way? For me, I'd rather go with somebody who's been there before, that can show me the way to the top of that mountain. I can literally walk in their footsteps. Well, it's the same way in life. Life is a big mountain. And there are lots of mountains during your life that you have to overcome. And Jesus has already overcome all those mountains. He's already walked those trails. And all you have to do is to walk in the footsteps of Jesus. And He will guide you to where you need to go. He will guide you over that mountain. And even though those mountains are tough to get over, like I said, Jesus has already done it. He's already overcome those mountains. And He can help you overcome those mountains too. And that's why I'm hooking up to Jesus. He's a champion. You want to be a champion? Hook yourself up to a champion. Because Jesus is the champion. Because He's already overcome the entire world. And that's somebody I want to be associated with. And because of that, I can have peace. I can have peace in my heart because I know that Jesus is there for me all the time. He's got my back. So I don't have to worry and stress about anything because Jesus is going to help me through everything. All right? So as we go through this week, hopefully we'll talk about this a little more in devotions throughout the week. Just meditate on that. And again, if you are feeling alone during this holiday season, make sure you talk to somebody. God uses people. That's why we're here. God uses people to help other people. If you feel alone, if you feel depression or sadness, make sure you talk to somebody. Talk to a friend, talk to a teacher, talk to a parent, talk to a pastor, talk to somebody you trust. Because God will use people to help pull you out of that situation. And you are not alone. God is there for you all the time. You just have to turn to Him. All right, hope you guys have a fantastic week. I'll see you guys real soon. God bless.